Bye.
Is just the latest of many ancient attempts at immortality discovered by archaeologists over the years. But what drives humankind to seek eternal life? Is it merely self-preservation? Or could there be another force at work? One that may be connected to the fact that every ancient culture on Earth described the gods as immortal.
In ancient Greek myths, we learn of the food of the gods, which they called ambrosia, an immortality food. These beings possessed some form of a liquid or an elixir that ultimately somehow altered their blood and promoted immortality. Some of the stories that we hear about this drink ambrosia is when the eyewitness is taken up into the sky. There are actual ancient Greek mythologies that describe these shiny star islands that descend from the sky and then under their own propulsion moved around. The entire Greek pantheon of gods is based on visiting extraterrestrials.
Is it possible that humanity's centuries-old quest to attain eternal life is fueled by a desire to become like the otherworldly beings that our ancestors actually encountered? Curiously, there are a number of stories from the ancient world presented not as fiction, but as historical record that describe people of an earlier age living extraordinarily long lives.
In the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, we learn of figures like Noah and Methuselah who lived for hundreds of years, 800 and 900 years. The Bible never tells us how they were able to live that long.
There is an artifact at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England, that is called the WB44 King's List of Ancient Sumeria. On there, you have a chronology of kings and the combined years of when these rulers were in charge is 241,000 years. And on that WB44 list, you have so-called historical figures where you actually have archaeology corroborating existence of those people. So, in my opinion, the WB44 list is a list of extraterrestrial space travelers, and the entire King's List is correct.
Could it be that George Van Tassel and many others like him had been driven by a deep-seated memory of a time when our ancestors existed alongside extraterrestrials who seemed to live forever? Perhaps the answer can be found by examining the events that led to the construction of the Integratron and George Van Tassel's alien encounter. Standing alone in California's barren Mojave Desert is a towering 7-story boulder called Giant Rock. It is here that George Van Tassel's strange journey began in the 1940s, just 3 miles from where he would eventually build Integratron.
Giant Rock is a 25,000-ton boulder
Serrano and the Chema community would do their ceremonies at Giant Rock, but only the chief was allowed to get close to Giant Rock.
In November of 2019, ancient astronaut theorist David Jonas traveled to the site of Giant Rock to meet with local historian Barbara Harris and learn more about the inception of the Integratron.
Hello, Barbara.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me here. So, please tell me the story of Giant Rock.
Well, they say it was millions of years old. And basically, this whole area here is made up of granite. And many, many years ago, there's a volcanic eruption. And, of course, this is the product of that volcanic eruption.
What is the early story of Giant Rock then with Native Americans?
Well, this ground was considered very sacred by the Native Americans. And they would come here and use it seasonally. But they considered it so sacred that only the shamans and the chiefs were allowed to stay here at the rock. At the turn of the 19th century, the homesteading and the white man started to come in.
And that has to do with this early prospector who lived under the rock.
Frank Kreitzer. And he was responsible for building the roads to Giant Rock.
In 1930, George Van Tassel had a chance encounter with prospector Frank Kreitzer at his uncle's auto repair shop in Santa Monica, which led to him investing in Kreitzer's mining operations in the Mojave Desert. Kreitzer was known in the area for his eccentric behavior, which included using mining dynamite to blow a hole in the bottom of Giant Rock, one big enough to live in. Van Tassel's initial ties to the area stemmed from a friendship forged with Kreitzer over the years.
He lived under this rock.
Yes, he was actually a guy who was looking for people to come and visit him under his rock. However, Frank, he also had a dark side to him. So, in July of 1942, the U.S. government had an old man's draft. And it required people between the ages of 18 and 64 to register for the draft.
And so he got caught up in that.
Yeah, he was 54, and the local sheriffs came out here, who happened to be friends with him, and offered to take him into the local town to register for the draft. He walked into a back room and came out wearing a pair of binoculars that had wires attached. And he basically said, "Leave me alone or we're all going to go to hell together." And he took the two wires, put them together, and
Right under here, that.
yes.
Okay, wow.
And he blew up into little pieces. And one sheriff, actually, in one of his rib cages came off and impaled into the other one. And the other sheriff came flying out of the bottom of the rock. And the other sheriff who stood out here stood in shock while it all happened.
Frank Kreitzer's bizarre and violent action shocked the local community. Many questioned if he may have been influenced by the energy of Giant Rock itself, which the local Native American tribes had warned was only meant for sacred purposes. And according to geologists, Giant Rock does, in fact, produce energy. The interior of the rock is white because it is primarily composed of quartz, a mineral that generates an electrical charge when under stress, as it would be inside a massively heavy rock. Giant Rock is also believed to be located on top of a natural earth energy line, also known as a ley line.
George Van Tassel said the Integratron needed to be in a special place full of energy. We have a gold mine right nearby. This area has ley lines and aquifers. There's actually a mountain of quartz right here, and you can feel the energy when you're here.
Could electrical energy emanating from Giant Rock have had a deadly effect on Frank Kreitzer? Despite the horrific event that occurred at Giant Rock, one man was still drawn to the site, George Van Tassel. Over the course of his many visits to Kreitzer's rock home, he had become convinced that it was a place of unusual energy.
Now you have a vacancy under the rock. Van Tassel told his wife, pack
Santa
up,
Monica.
pack the girls, we're moving out to live under a rock.
So did the Van Tassels live underneath this rock then?
No, actually, most of their living quarters were outside. The underground area was primarily used for his channeling and meditation. So, as the story goes, Van Tassel had an experience.
Before his death, Frank Kreitzer had transformed the nearby ancient lake bed into a small airport. According to George Van Tassel, on the night of August 24th, 1953, a craft landed on the runway that was not of this world. He described the encounter in a